A very good evening to you all, and a very special one to Mr. Marios Theocharous, the Cultural Counselor of Cyprus's High Commission, which I want to express my gratitude to Marios, who has kindly supported this evening's event on many levels and for disseminating this evening's details to numerous friends of the High Commission, many of whom are here this evening. His assistance is greatly appreciated. Mr. Theocharous, please.
Distinguished guests, dear friends, colleagues, members of the diaspora, ladies and gentlemen. It is a true pleasure to welcome you all to the Hellenic Center this evening for a lecture that honors both Cyprus's deep past and its living cultural presence in London. We are especially delighted to welcome Dr. Artemis Georgiou, whose work continues to shed light on the intricate web of the Cypriot connectivity in the late Bronze Age. For me, this evening carries a special personal note. Artemis and I meet again after many, many years. We once spent an unforgettable summer together in Besançon, France, studying French, walking the streets to understand firsthand the fenêtres de vie, les tuiles, the urban textures, and the architectural rhythms of that elegant city. Do you remember, Artemis? And we even shared a stage performing the myth of Arodafnusa in a beautiful theater in the heart of Besançon, a moment of youthful creation that I still treasure deeply. I see Artemis here today in her distinguished academic role, bringing both joy and pride. I would like to express our sincere thanks to the Greek Archaeological Committee for organizing and hosting this event, and in particular, Dr. Zeta Theodoropoulos Polychroniadis for her steadfast commitment to promoting Greek and Cypriot archaeology in the UK. We are honored to support this year's 4th annual Matti Egon lecture, and we are proud that tonight's focus on Cyprus, a land whose ancient past continues to illuminate the wider history of the Mediterranean. The High Commissioner sends his warm regards. He would have very much wished to be here with us tonight, but is attending an official Commonwealth engagement. He asked me to convey his appreciation for the work of the Archaeological Committee UK and his pride in the presence of distinguished Cypriot scholarship on this stage. As the cultural section of the Cyprus High Commission, we continue to shape a rich and vibrant program of events that showcase the cultural breadth of Cyprus. As we walk towards 2026, the year of Cyprus's presidency of the Council of the European Union, we are preparing a strong season of events to honor this important milestone. This includes our developing partnership with the Oxford Philharmonic Orchestra, featuring a surprise pianist, a performance by Anna Avramidou at Cadogan Hall in June to mark Europe Month. A February concert with the London City Orchestra featuring soloist Victoria Mavromoustaki, and a special edition of our film festival dedicated to Cypriot female directors that will travel all over the UK. Before the holidays, we will softly open an exhibition dedicated to British Cypriot artists, and in the new year, we will present the major exhibition of Paul Georgiou here at the Hellenic Center, one of our closest collaborators. In the words of Cypriot poets, Cyprus is often evoked through its copper, το άλικο μέταλλο που άναβε στάχτες και μνήμες, the metal that once lit trade routes, encounters, and transformations. Tonight's lecture brings that world to life, a Cyprus that looked outward, connected, dynamic, a Cyprus that shaped the sea around it as much as it was shaped by it. Artemis, we welcome you warmly. It is moving for me to see you not as Arodafnusa on stage, but as a scholar illuminating the deep, resonant layers of our island's story. I wish everyone an inspiring evening and meaningful reflections. Thank you.
What a lovely big audience, and wonderful to see so many newcomers. As chair of the Greek Archaeological Committee UK, it is my pleasure to welcome you this evening, which is always a very special event. It's the 4th annual Matti Egon lecture, and it commemorates the legacy of our founder, a truly admirable woman and a dedicated patron of classics who succeeded in promoting Greek archaeology in the UK and granted scholarships to graduate students in archaeology in the UK from Greece and Cyprus, thus giving them the opportunity to access the best educational institutions in the UK. This evening, we celebrate her memory with a special speaker, one of Gakuk's best Cypriot scholars, Dr. Artemis Georgiou, currently Assistant Professor at the Archaeological Research Unit of the University of Cyprus. Before we proceed with the lecture, we will start with a short video presenting Gakuk's mission as set by the late Matti Egon and Gakuk's achievements over the past 39 years.
Welcome to the Greek Archaeological Committee UK annual Matti Egon lecture. The Greek Archaeological Committee, founded in 1986 by Matti Egon Xelas, is a British registered charity which promotes Greek archaeology in the UK and grants scholarships to Greek and Cypriot Greek first-class graduates of limited means to pursue postgraduate studies in leading UK universities. Each year, this lecture serves as a tribute to the memory of our founder, who was a source of inspiration and encouragement to all. Her philanthropy and generosity touched many lives. Her legacy continues to live on through the charity's scholarship fund and the past scholars who advanced Greek archaeology across the world. To date, the Greek Archaeological Committee has granted 79 scholarships and delivered 68 public lectures. These scholarships are only possible through annual memberships and donations from individuals and institutions, 100% of which go towards the university fees of young, promising archaeologists, thus helping them fulfill their dreams. Support the Greek Archaeological Committee and help keep classical studies alive in the UK.
On behalf of Gakuk, I would like to express my gratitude to our donors, as without their help, our mission would not be possible. A big thank you goes to our major donors, Stamatia and Nikos Komninos, Matti's children, who gracefully continue her legacy, sponsor the Matti Egon Scholarship, and constantly support us in keeping their mother's vision alive. Due to unforeseen circumstances, they could not join us this evening, but they do send their very best wishes. This year, the Matti Egon Scholarship was awarded to Bouboulina Keramida and Theodore Mazis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Theodoros Mazis. I am a classical archaeology DPhil student at the University of Oxford in Merton College, and my research explores the symbolism of sirens and their ties to the ancient Greek female world.
Good evening. My name is Bouboulina Maria Keramida. I am a PhD student at the University College London, and my research title is Computational and Geoarchaeological Modeling of Dynamic Coastal Landscapes in Northern Greece.
The committee is very grateful to the AG Leventis Foundation, a stout supporter of our mission and major donor over the years by funding an annual scholarship. We are moreover honored this evening by the presence of the director of the foundation, Mrs. Luisa Leventis, and members of the Leventis family. This year's scholarship was awarded to Dimitris Meto.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Dimitris Meto. I'm studying my PhD at the University of Nottingham. It's regarding Epirus Nova and Prevalutana and its transformation from the 3rd to the 7th century. Thank you.
Thank you. A warm thank you goes to my fellow GACU members, whose annual subscriptions fund annually a scholarship. This year, it was awarded to Philippos Roussos.
Good evening. My name is Philippos Roussos, and I'm a DPhil student at Merton College, University of Oxford. And my thesis topic is gender, social status, and the construction of masculine identities in early Iron Age and archaic Crete.
Thank you. Last but not least, I would like to present a new member of the Gakuk family, and just for only one reason, Dr. Katerina Vavaliou. She was a past scholar, and now she has joined the Gakuk family. Thank you, Katerina, and congratulations. It gives me great pleasure to present this evening's speaker, a distinguished archaeologist, Dr. Artemis Georgiou. After studying history and archaeology at the University of Cyprus, Artemis undertook postgraduate studies at the University of Oxford, where she was awarded her master's and DPhil at Oxford, under the supervision of Professor Irene Lemos. During her postgraduate studies, she was awarded prestigious scholarships, including the A.G. Leventis Scholarship in Greek Studies at Merton College and the Greek Archaeological Committee UK Scholarship. Her main research interests were, however, focused on her homeland's cultural heritage, and she specialized in Cypriot archaeology. She was awarded a postdoctoral Marie Curie grant implemented at the University of Cyprus under the mentorship of Professor Maria Iacovou. In 2018 to 2020, she was a research and teaching fellow at the University of Cyprus, and then she was the Edgar Peltenburg Postdoctoral Fellow for Cypriot Prehistory at the Cyprus American Archaeological Research Institute. In 2021, Dr. Georgiou was appointed Assistant Research Professor at the Archaeological Unit of the University of Cyprus. She is the Principal Investigator of the Compass Research Project, a European Research Council starting grant, and also the Principal Investigator of the ASTER project, funded by the Cyprus Research and Innovation Foundation. A diligent excavator, Artemis has been the Assistant Director of the excavation at Palaepaphos since 2012, in addition to her work at Pila Kokinokremos, who was her DPhil subject, as well as Idalion, Ambeleri, Garoskipou, Agipende, and Lefkandi. Artemis has been presenting the fruit of her tireless archaeological activity and research at conferences and internationally published papers, books, and monographs in several languages. A talented archaeologist, Dr. Georgiou will now take us on a journey to her homeland, Cyprus, and will shed light on the importance of Cyprus within Eastern Mediterranean maritime networks in the second millennium BC. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Georgiou.
Esteemed guests, dear colleagues, dear friends, it is a profound honor to be in the presence of all esteemed guests this evening to share the results of my research on ancient Cyprus and its Mediterranean connections. I'm truly humbled thinking that a little over a decade ago, or maybe more, I was standing on the opposite side of this podium as a student and a scholar of the Greek Archaeological Committee UK, our gracious host for this evening. The committee played a pivotal part in my academic journey, as it was only thanks to the support of the Greek Archaeological Committee UK that I was able to complete my DPhil at the University of Oxford and then proceed to claim the numerous research grants that Dr. Polychroniadis has just mentioned, the results of which I'm presenting today. I'm especially honored to deliver a lecture in memory of Mrs. Matti Egon, whose vision, generosity, and unwavering passion for the archaeology of the Hellenic lands created opportunities for so many of us. Her legacy lives on, not only in the committee's continued support of students in archaeology, but also through the careers of all alumni and alumnae of the Greek Archaeological Committee UK, who now serve the archaeology of Greece and Cyprus in academic and public sector positions. I also wish to extend my gratitude to the entire Council of the Greek Archaeological Committee for the invitation to address this lecture tonight. And I'm especially grateful to Dr. Zeta Theodoropoulou Polychroniadis for her wonderful hospitality. And I take this opportunity to congratulate Zeta for ensuring that the vision of Matti continues to thrive through the support of new generations of archaeologists. And my final word of gratitude goes to my DPhil supervisor and one of the earliest members of the Greek Archaeological Committee UK, Professor Irene S, whose guidance shaped my academic development in countless ways, and I'm proud to be able to call her my mentor and a friend. Now to our lecture. So my aim for tonight's lecture is to take you on a journey into the realms of prehistoric Mediterranean connectivity, and we will be doing this through the lens of Cyprus and the Cypriot communities. Maritime travel has diachronically knitted together otherwise distant regions in the Mediterranean, encouraging commercial and cultural connectivity among geographically discrete communities. During the most part of the second millennium BC, the political authorities and imperial regimes that dominated the Eastern Mediterranean, that is the Mycenaean palaces in the Aegean, the Hittite Empire in Anatolia, the city-states dotting the Levant, Pharaonic Egypt, and the Cypriot polities were entangled in a web of intricate interregional contacts comprising commercial exchanges and diplomatic ties. Systematic commercial exchanges, predominantly the bronze-making metals of copper and tin, formed the backbone of long-distance trade during this period that we very appropriately call the Late Bronze Age. Cyprus, acknowledged as the island of copper already during ancient times, plays an integral part in discussions involving Mediterranean connectivity. The geological formations encircling the Troodos mountain range are exceptionally wealthy in copper ores, and the masses of ancient slag heaps encircling the Troodos, slag corresponds to the remains of copper processing, so what we see here are the leftovers of this industry. These are clear attestations of their exploitation in antiquity. As the chief provider of copper, and considering the island's strategic position in Eastern Mediterranean sea routes, Cyprus is often referred to as the crossroads of Eastern Mediterranean. However, as criticized by several scholars, this notion projects an exogenous vantage point which endangers the development of interpretative narratives that present Cypriot material culture as mere derivative of others and portray the island's communities as passive recipients of external influence. So the approach I follow in my research draws from the inspiring work of Maria Iacovou, my professor and mentor at the University of Cyprus, who has advocated examining Cyprus from within. And through this spectrum, we examine external connections in relation to Cyprus's internal dynamics in the social, economic, and political spheres. This Cyprocentric approach does not seek to forcibly or artificially isolate the island from its Mediterranean surroundings. It rather urges us to consider how internal developments within the island's political and economic landscape affected the involvement of Cypriot communities with external affairs, and vice versa, how broader events impacted the island's internal structures. More importantly, this perspective acknowledges and celebrates Cyprus's cultural distinctiveness on its own accord and not as a derivation of others. So now that we have clarified our methodological viewpoint, let us examine Cypriot connectivity. The earliest attestation for an organized extra-insular distribution of Cypriot copper coincides with the beginning of the Cypriot Bronze Age, conventionally referred to as the Filia phase, starting at around 2400 BC. Based on a recent research, coastal settlements in the north part of the island commanded a network that controlled the flow of copper from the Troodos ore-bearing deposits and functioned as gateways for the metal's export. This was a very short-lived endeavor that was disrupted due to the collapse of urban institutions in the Near East. Even though recent studies indicate that some form of extra-insular connectivity was underway during the early and the Middle Bronze Age, it was only during the dawn of the Late Bronze Age that Cypriot communities established regular, systematic, and formal contacts with other maritime regions. This is the period that we'll investigate further tonight. In order to tackle Cypriot connectivity during the Late Bronze Age, I have divided this period into 3 distinctive chronological cycles, and these do not necessarily correspond to the conventional phasing. So the first horizon we're examining tonight concerns the earliest establishment of regular and intensive commercial links. The second corresponds to the apogee of Mediterranean connectivity, characterized by the large-scale transport of goods conducted under centralized authorities. And finally, for the last horizon, we'll examine commercial strategies during the period that ensues this, the collapse of this construct during what we call the crisis years of the 12th and 11th centuries BC. The discussion of these horizons incorporates fresh results produced by the research project Compass that I direct at the Archaeological Research Unit of the University of Cyprus. This is an advanced research project that investigates Cypriot connectivity through the holistic study of ceramic remains. Thanks to the generous funding by the European Research Council, a team of postdoctoral researchers is employed at our university to undertake advanced interdisciplinary research. And the project aspires to shed light on interregional commerce and intercultural connectivity through the integrated study of material remains deposited in Cypriot contexts. Discussions will also involve a second project that I direct at the University of Cyprus. It is called ASTEER. And this recently launched project, funded by Cyprus's Research and Innovation Foundation, focuses on the study of a late Cypriot ceramic class known as white slipware to investigate aspects of regional production and manufacturing technology. So the first chronological horizon we examine today concerns a transitional phase that spans the end of the Middle Bronze Age and the beginning of the Late, so roughly the middle of the 18th century to the middle of the 15th century BC. This phase was characterized by substantial changes in the island settlement pattern, most vividly attested by the foundation of new settlements by or near the coast. These settlements functioned as the terminal points in an elaborate network of special function sites, the point of departure being the cupriferous zones of the Troodos foothills. The period marks the earliest establishment of regular, systematic, and formal contacts between Cyprus and neighboring regions, and this is manifested by 4 interlinked sets of data. The first are the written testimonies to Alashia. Alashia is a place name associated with Cyprus, attested in the records of polities in the Near East and Egypt. References to Alashia during this early phase relate to the import of copper and originate from the Mesopotamian cities of Mari and Babylonia and the Egyptian town of Memphis. The second element illustrating the connectivity of Cypriot communities is the introduction of novel technologies and customs. The most profound is the introduction of the potter's wheel, attested for the first time on the island just a few millennia after its invention. The earliest wheel-made forms were plainware drinking cups, which according to our colleague Lindy Crew, reflect the attempts of Cypriot elites to endorse an urban lifestyle associated with new consumption practices. The third testimony for the integration of Cypriots into interregional commercial strategies is the increasing deposition of Cyprus-made materials in foreign contexts. These mostly concern pottery remains, but it is assumed that these were traveling alongside copper, which was later recycled and is therefore not as visible. Early late Cypriot vessel exports are mostly juglets and bowls, which despite the introduction of the potter's wheel, continued to be produced through handmade techniques. And these were found in varying numbers, mostly along the coastal Levant and Egypt. Finally, the establishment of regular contacts with other Mediterranean regions during this first horizon is attested by the increasing deposition of imported artifacts in the Cypriot strata. These include late Minoan and late Helladic finewares from the Aegean, as well as cylinder seals and transport amphorae imported from the Levant and Egypt. Our research team has focused on an intriguing ceramic class that was imported to Cyprus during this early interaction period. This is the so-called Tel El Yahudiya ware, which was named after the eponymous site in Egypt. Vessels of this ware are exclusively encountered in the form of small juglets, characterized by dark-colored surfaces with punctured decoration. They functioned, as containers of precious liquid commodities used in funerary rituals by elite groups. And it has been suggested that their shape and decoration emulate figs in an attempt to denote that the content was fig oil known to have been used as perfume. Tel El Yahudiya ware vessels may seem unimpressive, but they are valuable to us archaeologists in that they constitute one of the earliest instances of what we call international pristine objects, occurring at geographically discrete parts of the Mediterranean and imitated locally. And it is important that Cyprus is part of this network. Our studies within the Compass project have disclosed some interesting observations. We managed to identify two waves of importation for these Egyptian-made precious commodity containers. The first clusters around sites in the Morphu and the Larnaca bays, suggesting that port sites in these two regions were pioneers in the inception of extra-insular connections. The second wave saw the introduction of larger numbers of these vessels, but this time it is the town of Enkomi that prevails, showcasing its rise as the leading harbor town in Cyprus. The geographical distribution of this later production could possibly correspond to the periphery of Enkomi, or at least to Enkomi's sphere of influence. And the occurrence of imported objects at the center of the island, so far away from the coast, reveals the significance of these copper-producing zones for the consolidation of the island's emergent economic order. During what I have defined as the second chronological horizon examined in my talk today, that is the mid-15th to the 13th century BC, Mediterranean interconnections reached an apogee to the extent that the period is often referred to as the Age of Internationalism. And the unprecedented international spirit is best encapsulated in the remains of a ship that sank at the site of Uluburun, close to the southern shores of Turkey at the close of the 14th century BC. The ship carried an impressive array of raw materials, high-end finished products, and a plethora of other commodities. Its primary freight was metals, and specifically 10 tons of copper, which was confirmed came from Cyprus, as well as a ton of tin. These are the two ingredients that we need in a perfect analogy to make bronze. The Uluburun shipwreck profoundly exemplifies the magnitude of bulk commerce between elites, if not royals, during this era. The unprecedented character of Mediterranean connectivity is further manifested by the roughly contemporary archives of Mediterranean states. Among these stand out the so-called Amarna letters, found at the site of Amarna in Egypt, that record the correspondence between the Egyptian pharaoh and other royalties, including the king of Al-Ashia, that is, of Cyprus. In these records, Al-Ashia is again mentioned in relation to the provision of copper in very large quantities. But more importantly, we are astounded by the fact that the king of Al-Ashia was entitled to refer to the king of Egypt, the pharaoh, as my brother, which in the diplomatic language of 2nd millennium BC Eastern Mediterranean would suggest that the two leaders were hierarchically equal. The only king of Al-Ashia known to us by name is Kusmesusa. This is the only name of the Al-Ashian king that we know, who corresponded with the king of Ugarit at the end of the 13th century BC. Ugarit was a cosmopolitan and incredibly wealthy and powerful harbor town, yet in one of these letters, Kusmesusa calls the king of Ugarit my son, indicating the hierarchical superiority of the Cypriot ruler. Now, how do these external testimonies help us elucidate the Cypriot politico-economic landscape? The Uluburun shipwreck is a tangible testimony of the island's ability to produce 10 tons of copper for a single shipload, and we can only speculate on the frequency of such shipments. For the Cypriot harbors to function as major exporters of copper, the development of a complex settlement pattern managed by intricate political and economic forms was a prerequisite to support this heavy industry. Small settlements located at the center of the island are identified as mining villages dedicated to the extraction and smelting of the copper ores. Other sites on the hinterland functioned as intermediary centers or agricultural support villages. And this chain terminated at the coast, where the settlements established during the previous horizon functioned not only as ports of export for the metal, but also developed into major urban centers in charge of an extended periphery. Before leaving the Cypriot harbors, copper was cast into standardized units, principally in the form of oxide ingots, a guarantee for the metal's Cypriot quality and standardized weight. The settlement of Engomi was the dominating center of the Cypriot eastern coast. And even though it lies the farthest from the copper-rich ores, Engomi was the most successful in securing a long-term and steady supply of copper as a result of the operation of a complex network along the Messauria plain. Further to the south, the Larnaca Bay accommodated two distinct urban centers, Kition and Hala Sultan Tekke, both equipped with well-sheltered harbors, and both exhibiting far-reaching external contacts. And I show you here the Larnaca Salt Lake. So every time you fly from the Larnaca airport, what you're seeing in the Salt Lake is the harbor of the ancient town that is now silted. In the south central coast are the remains of two other urban centers, Maroni, and the excavator is here, Dr. Cadogan, and Kalavasos. The urban landscape of the two settlements was dominated by monumental structures, which were dressed in ashlar masonry, the typical masonry for prestige structures in Cyprus, which served large-scale storage and administrative purposes. Further to the west, the Kouris River Valley constitutes the single instance of a late Cypriot urban settlement that is situated inland at the village of Alassa. Enclosing this short tour of the period's major Cypriot centers is the site of Kukla Palaepaphos, where our recent research by the University of Cyprus, under the direction of Professor Iacovou, has been exposing crucial new data on the late Bronze Age horizon of this town. Several administrative mechanisms were developed to manage this complex system. For the first time on the island, an indigenous writing system, that we refer to it today as the Cypro-Minoan script, was developed. It remains undeciphered, so we don't know what language it records, and it's probably one or maybe more unknown languages. But more importantly, none of the late Cypriot settlements has provided evidence for the maintenance of a formal state archive. And as a matter of fact, a few inscribed tablets notwithstanding, the majority of these texts are short inscriptions on a wide array of media, such as vessels or weights or tools, indicating a much more widespread use of the script compared to other Mediterranean regions. Another idiosyncratic element of late Cypriot administration are seals. Now, in other parts of the Mediterranean and the Near East, these devices were employed to leave an imprint on wet clay that was tied at the entrance of a storeroom, for example, as a means of controlling access to the agricultural production. But Cypriots were doing things differently again. In Cyprus, clay ceilings are practically absent, while cylinder seals are often found embedded in jewelry, which entirely invalidates their function as for sealing. And this is taken to suggest that seals in Cyprus were not used as phragistic devices, but were rather employed as insignia, so as visual elements of status and authority. And a third mechanism that was uniquely employed in late Bronze Age Cyprus are relief impressions on storage vessels that depict imaginative compositions involving chariots, bulls, lions, and imaginary beasts like griffins. These impressions were produced by rolling a cylinder while the vessel was still wet, and were clearly used to mark the vessels and to indicate ownership, indicating when the contents were to be consumed, or even the vessel's contents. Alongside copper traveled other Cypriot goods, possibly traded through different mechanisms. Cypriot finewares, mostly of the so-called base ring and white slipware, continued to be exported to the Eastern markets, despite the fact that they were handmade. The small closed vessels were certainly exported as containers of precious commodities, such as perfumed oils or narcotics, and we know that opium, for example, was used and exported from Cyprus as for medicinal or ceremonial purposes. But the fact that open vessels also traveled abroad indicates that Cypriot finewares were appreciated as vessels per se, and not just for the contents. The mortuary record of Cyprus during this era of internationalism displays the affluence of Cypriot elites and their access to prestige artifacts that include artifacts made of ivory, faience, silver, and gold imported from the Levant and Egypt. Mycenaean finewares were found by the hundreds in the Cypriot mortuary contexts, mostly stirrup jars used as containers for precious liquids, as well as large pictorial craters of the bell and the amphoroid type. These were decorated with elaborate compositions involving chariot hunting, animals, and mythical beasts. And interestingly, this form, the amphoroid crater, is exceptionally rare in the Greek mainland compared to the hundreds of such vessels found in Cypriot and Levantine contexts. And we assume that these vessels were manufactured in Greece by Mycenaean potters with the Eastern markets specifically in mind. And this shows a very early form of marketing. But the possible involvement of Cypriot merchants or middlemen in the circulation of Mycenaean pottery to the east is manifested by the proliferation of marks inscribed on such vessels, some of which are identified as signs of the Cypriot script that were found both in Cyprus and the Levant. So to close this second horizon, I include here F.A. Ann's Rhyton, deposited within a 13th century tomb at Kition that I believe best encapsulates the international spirit of this period. It is made of blue faience, the technological know-how of which can be traced to Egypt, while it features a Syrian-inspired iconography showing hunters with knives on their boots. The form of a conical Rhyton draws from Mycenaean Greece, as are the spirals decorating its lower part. All of the stimuli were well acculturated within the late Cypriot milieu, and so this vessel was presented as a burial gift to a deceased member of the Kition community by their family. The dawn of the 12th century BC marked the end of this international era and precipitated a new transformative period for the entire Mediterranean, which brings us to the third chronological horizon we will examine today. The period is marked by the collapse of several of the palatial and imperial political regimes that thrived during the previous horizon, generating significant changes to the level and intensity of Mediterranean interconnections, but not a complete cessation of contacts, as it was assumed by previous scholarship. The new dynamic economic system that ensued favored freelance commerce operating in smaller and regional spheres. In Cyprus, the cumulative events of around 1200 BC brought about significant transformations in the island settlement pattern, epitomized by the abandonment of the primary centers at Maroni and Kalavasos on the south coast. However, the urban environment of other settlements continued to be occupied. For instance, Enkomi, Kition, Chalasultan-Tsekye, and Palaepaphos. And as a matter of fact, Palaepaphos and Kition, amidst an otherwise critical period, undertook the construction of monumental sanctuaries. The period coincides with the foundation of two new coastal settlements, Mapaleokastro and Pylagokinokremos, and the profusion of imported artifacts suggests that these two short-lived settlements were vibrant trading posts operating within this segmented type of commerce that emerged in this period. It was during this third chronological horizon that Cyprus was at the receiving end of migratory movements of Greek-speaking populations. However, it is important to note that these population movements remain largely invisible in the Cypriot material record. In other words, we are unable to assign any sites or any distinctive archaeological contexts to the operations of migrant populations. But the presence of Mycenaean populations on the island is manifested retrospectively through the language spoken by the island's populations in the first millennium BC, which, according to philologists, bears close affinities to the Greek language recorded in the text of the Mycenaean period. And this is a strong marker of the influx of Greek-speaking populations into Cyprus following the collapse of the Mycenaean palaces. Our research has confirmed that despite the disruption of formalized trade, Cypriot communities continue to be engaged in extra-regional commercial activities during the transformative centuries that followed the 1200 BC collapse, as attested through several testimonies. In the years following 1200 BC, the production of the copper oxide ingot was largely abandoned, since the type of commerce that supported transactions of this scale was abolished. However, the Cypriot centers continue to produce copper, attested by copper processing implements found within 12th century contexts. Simultaneously, we note an increase in the value of scrap metal, which was found hoarded at several sites in Cyprus, such as, for example, the site of Pylagokinokremos. Excavations at this settlement unearthed plentiful caches of copper-based objects, as well as a large hoard of gold objects and gold scrap, and an extremely rare silver hoard comprising 2 silver ingots and a fragmentary silver bowl. Hoarding indicates a period of uncertainty, but also relates to the emergent informal metals trade in a highly commoditized form in weighted units of scrap. And scrap bronze was also appropriate for export, judging by the inclusion of scrap bronze tools made in Cyprus among the cargo of another ship. This one sank at the site of Kelidonia at around 1200 BC. Cypriot communities were focal in the development and consolidation of iron technology. Already during the 12th century BC, we observe an increase in iron objects from both tomb and settlement contexts in Cyprus, and by the beginning of the 11th century BC, iron was employed for utilitarian purposes. Bimetallic knives were also exported to the Aegean and the Levant, where they were also locally copied. We are still unsure of the series of events that resulted in the shift from bronze to iron. However, there is general consensus that Cypriot metalsmiths and traders contributed not only to the distribution of iron objects in the Eastern Mediterranean, but also to the diffusion of the technology associated with iron processing. Another trademark of the globalized Mediterranean world that was obliterated in the years following 1200 BC is the large-scale circulation of Mycenaean finewares, which practically ceased when the Mycenaean palaces collapsed. At the same time, the Cypriot workshops began producing pottery types that emulated Mycenaean forms, and this ceramic class was eventually established at the Cypriot finewares par excellence. Recent integrated studies have confirmed that Cypriot-made Aegean-style pottery was exported to several sites abroad, indicating the continuation of trade on pre-existing or new networks and highlighting the role of Cypriot potters and merchants whose entrepreneurial promptness accommodated this market void. An additional critical indicator of continuous commercial activity in the Eastern Mediterranean is the proliferation of imported transport vessels in Cypriot contexts of the 12th and 11th centuries BC. These special function vessels, known as Canaanite or Egyptian jars, and produced in various locations in the Levant and Egypt, respectively, are the focus of our ERC-funded research. The sole purpose of this ceramic class was to contain and transport agricultural commodities in bulk, such as wine, oil, resins, etc., stacked in the cargo of ships. In the frame of our project, our team has undertaken comprehensive museum studies across Cyprus to record the frequency and the typology of such vessels from numerous sites and various contexts. Among the many case studies examined so far, I mentioned the quantitative analysis we have undertaken at the port town of Kition at the settlement of Pamboula, which has demonstrated that transport containers were continuously imported in great numbers during the 12th and 11th centuries BC, thus corroborating the uninterrupted connections between the Cypriot harbor town and Levantine sites. In addition, these contextual museum studies have formed the basis for the meaningful implementation of the project's interdisciplinary scope. Our project, Compass, endorses an integrated scheme that consists of macroscopic, chemical, and petrographic analysis to characterize the production clays of imported transport amphorae and determine their provenance. And in particular, the analysis undertaken by our project's petrographer, Marcella Jobe, have preliminarily shown the introduction of vessels produced in the southern Levant, specifically along the Carmel coast, with rarer instances produced in the central and northern Levant. We have also corroborated the introduction of vessels produced with Nile silts and Nile marls, and we are further examining the possibility of some limited Cypriot production of such transport amphorae. For the crucial aspect of identifying the now invisible contents of imported transport amphorae, we are collaborating with the Organic Geochemistry Unit of the University of Bristol's, and the analyses are underway, but visible residues on the inner surfaces of some of these samples that possibly correspond to resins are highly promising for fruitful results. As regards the explication of manufacturing techniques led by our researcher, Dr. Maria Iacovou, our team has undertaken macroscopic inspections as well as X-ray analysis of microstructures. These complementary methods have determined that the majority of the vessels were formed in segments using the wheel coiling technique, which involves the joining of rolls of clay on a rotational device, and with the selective use of molds for the bases. Our team has also studied the volume of these vessels to determine capacity measurements. Dr. Citrice Catlois from our team has been calculating the volume of complete amphorae using polystyrene beads, as well as advanced digital tools to assess the level of standardization relating to the construction of these vessels. And finally, the epigraphist in our group, Dr. Cassandra Donnelly, has been recording marks incised on imported Canaanite jars to disentangle marking practices relating to the management of trade. And her meticulous studies have identified inscriptions in the Cyprominoan script, complex marks that do not relate to a formal script, simple marks like a line or a cross, and an interesting category comprising multiple parallel lines incised on the handles of Canaanite jars, which we propose may relate to some form of measurement, such as the volume or the weight of the contents. Regardless, this practice again discloses the involvement of Cypriot merchants in the distribution of Levantine transport containers during this period. I hope it was not too tiring, but I reached the end and the conclusions. So to conclude, I hope that this overview has demonstrated the varying degrees to which Cyprus participated in interregional commerce and intercultural connectivity in the Mediterranean during the course of the second millennium BC, and that I have adequately highlighted the island's idiosyncratic politico-economic management system, the very eclectic assimilation of external stimuli, and showcase the ingenuity and entrepreneurship of Cypriot craftsmen and merchants. Especially as regards the third horizon I have examined today, it appears that the dissolution of the formalized commerce was beneficial for the involvement of Cypriot merchants in the newly rising segmented type of trade. The use of the script and of marking strategies compatible with Cypriot practices on important goods such as Mycenaean finewares and Levantine transport amphorae indicates that the ability to write was much more dispersed in Cyprus than in other parts of the Mediterranean, and that a primary context of the script's function on the island was related to the management of trade. As our research project develops, I hope we will be able to shed light on the character of commercial and other links connecting the Cypriot communities with the rest of the Mediterranean, exploring the operation of specific networks or regional connections among sites in the Mediterranean, and addressing how transformations in the broader sphere can affect aspects of maritime commerce and connectivity. And with this, I close my presentation, and I thank you all very much for your attention.
Well, dear members of the Greek Archaeological Committee UK, our scholars and friends, I hope I'm not going to be too sentimental, but it's like parents are proud of their kids. I'm very proud about my students, and especially the brilliant Dr. Georgiou. And we are grateful to Artemis for this panorama of the role of Cyprus during the longue durée from the 18th to the 12th centuries BC. Together with our speaker, we explore the significant role that Cyprus played during the extended period of Mediterranean interactions. Coming from a long tradition of distinguished Cypriot archaeologists, such as Vasos Karagiotis and Maria Iacovou, Artemis offered an up-to-date, post-colonial approach by examining the island's internal social, political, and economic advances using the evidence from archaeology and other available data. This approach placed the island in the lead of the developments that marked the Mediterranean during this period, emphasizing the importance of Cyprus in shaping and participating in such mechanisms. The lectures demonstrated that Cyprus was not a passive recipient, but a significant contributor and participant, especially during the intensive intercultural exchanges from the 15th to the 13th centuries, a period known, as Artemis said, as the international era of the Mediterranean, and particularly of the Eastern Mediterranean. Material evidence that they were explored very thoroughly by Artemis, and texts support these views. Equally important is the reaction of the island after the so-called collapse, adjusting to the new economic and social conditions that impacted the entire region and beyond. Despite its troublesome history, Cyprus has a long tradition of surviving and thriving because of the resilience of its people. It's perhaps not accidental that even today, some of the top financiers and entrepreneurs come from the island, among whom are included our own benefactors, who along with us thoroughly enjoyed the lecture by our Cypriot colleague. Thank you very much, Artemis.
Thank you, Artemis, and thank you, Professor Lemos. Professor Lemos is also our academic advisor, and we thank her very much for all her help over the years. And heartfelt thanks to those who joined us this evening and to you who followed us on live media. For anyone interested in GACUC's aims and activities, please visit our website and all our social media. You can also watch past lectures on our YouTube channel. Help us to help young, promising archaeologists and students. If you wish to support us, please go to membership donations section of our website. Stay also tuned for our 40th anniversary celebrations in 2026. The drinks and nibbles are kindly offered by the cultural section of Cyprus's High Commission. So please join us now and get to meet the speaker, our scholars, and have a drink together. I thank you all for being here tonight, and I wish you a very, very happy Christmas. Thank you.